Yeah, it's just a fun expert.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Stuff and yeah. Make sure they're.
Such a nice night.
Maybe it was a pleasant distraction. Like that, I better rate here.
All right, okay. We'll call this board of directors meeting to order at 6:05 PM. The board has land acknowledgement, anti-racism statement posted to its website. Roll call tonight. Missing Keith. I did not hear from him, but Stu and Gail are both absent. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, that passes unanimously. Any announcements? No announcements, okay. Property owner comments, there is not a soul here, so we'll move past that to the presentation of the 2024 capital budget.
All right, well, thank you, AJ. So we're going to start with just kind of reviewing what the board and the finance committee roles are in the budget process and basically how the SBCA budget is created. SBCA's budget is prepared every year. This annual budget is approved by the board and voted on by the membership to be executed over the following calendar year. While maintaining the core concept of annual authorization, the annual budget is developed within a multi-year perspective through strategic and long-range planning, the preparation of a 10-year capital plan, and a 30-year reserve study. Revenue and expenditure, as well as constraints on assessment increases, are considered together to determine annual budget targets. The budget covers all SBCA departments and operations based on input and recommendations its manager. This process ensures the budget presented to the membership is a consolidated picture of operations and is voted on as a whole. Also, earlier this year, board directors provided input on what they would like to see over the next 1, 3, and 5 years, and that information was included in this process as well. Washington state laws and the SBCA bylaws clarify important aspects of the budgeting and planning process, primarily the powers and the authority of the SBCA board. Although SBCA bylaws provide for a finance committee, the lack of a finance committee does not stall the budget process. The finance committee's role is simply to provide recommendations to the board regarding departmental and operational budgets. It does not have any actual authority to impose revisions or changes. So in years such as this one, the inability to form a finance committee due to lack of volunteers has no impact on the budget adoption process. This is because it is the board and only the board who is given authority to adopt the budget, subject to membership approval by RCW 6490-525 and SBCA bylaw Article 3, Section 3. I'm going to throw it over to our GM, Joanne Jensen.
My portion of the presentation this evening is to review our active capital projects, and I will begin with active projects in SURF. The table that you see on the slide summarizes the active projects for SURF and includes their cost. In some cases, 2 cases, and those lines have asterisks. We are estimating the cost because we don't yet have final bids, nor do we have final approval for those costs, but those are estimated. So the first project is the Marina Launch Dock replacement. A shorelines permit was received from Whatcom County. Design is complete and a building permit application was submitted on March 30th. The project will go out to bid once permits are received to ensure that no design changes are needed. Construction will then follow. Area Z maintenance remodel. Design is complete and was submitted to Whatcom County for permit on February 27th. It is expected to go out for bid this summer with construction beginning in the fall of 2023. That's this fall. The remodel is expected to take 4 to 5 months to complete. The Barn 8 remodel. This project was submitted to the county for permit on February 7th, 2023. It is expected to go out for bid this summer. Due to extended permit review times by Whatcom County, construction is expected not to start until next year in April. Construction cannot take place during the winter months because of weather conditions. Design for replacing the covered bridge entrance is complete and has also been submitted for permit. The HVAC system in the barn is also at the end of its life. A replacement has been designed and is in permit review with the county. All of these components will be included in the bid package. Playground ADA improvements. Equipment has been ordered and is expected to arrive at the end of August. Construction will begin and be completed in September 2023 at both playgrounds. The Area Z Tall Barn refurbishment. Construction is scheduled to start in the middle of August, so a couple of weeks, and it will only take about 2 weeks to complete. The Austin Creek repair. Design and permitting is ongoing. This project requires a shoreline permit in addition to some others, which has extended the timeline. For those of you who don't know, the shoreline permit process includes putting it out for comment to the public. Construction on the Austin Creek repair is now expected to take place in 2024. Tennis court resurfacing and fence replacement. This project was issued for bid, but no contractors were able to complete in 2023. The project will be reissued for bid this winter with construction proposed for June of next year. This project is restricted by the Lake Whatcom watershed window, so no construction can be allowed before June the 1st. The irrigation system pump controller replacement. The contract for this work was recently executed and parts have been ordered. Installation will take place when parts arrive. Thank you.
So I'll just add that basically due to inaccuracies in replacement values impacting budgeting and planning, professional project management and engineering firms have been brought in to reevaluate existing conditions and expected remaining useful life of most components valued at over 1% of the annual budget. This will support appropriate planning for future replacements of Sudden Valley's major components. So Tyler is going to introduce the two projects that we're going to discuss.
Let's start with barn 6. Next thing in the packet here. Little summary on the history on some barn. Barn 6 was built in the early 1970s, to my knowledge, and is approximately 15 years old. Its construction is typical of a pole barn. The barn is approximately 130 feet by 100 feet, or the equivalent of 13,000 square feet. So it's a large structure. Sudden Valley has completed a couple studies of the barn that we are aware of. In 2013, a company called Architectural Investigative Reports and Opinions, also known as ARROW, evaluated all of Sudden Valley's facilities, including Barn 6, and identified numerous items for repair. It doesn't appear that many, if any, of the identified repairs were completed. A second analysis was completed in 2014 by Kingworks Consulting Engineers, who is now called Kingworks Structural Engineers. Their report identified a few items. Some examples. Of the approximate 100 posts, 18 contained substantial rot. The roof leaked and needed replacement. According to Kingworks' 2014 report, a new roof was planned at that time. The structure didn't meet seismic code or current seismic code. It is P&W's understanding from prior SVCA management, Bruce Bishop, that a year or two after the 2014 report came out, Sudden Valley made a decision to not complete any repairs to Barn 6 and let it further deteriorate. Since 2014, I don't know of any improvements that have been completed to Barn 6. To my knowledge, no additional official evaluations of the barn have been completed since 2014 either. P&W has consulted with Kingworks to see if any options exist for how to renovate the existing structure. The challenge with this option is numerous code requirements will trigger bringing the entire structure up to current seismic code. A couple of examples from the International Existing Building Code, commonly referred to as the IEBC, are Code 505.1 states that if the alterations impact over 50% of the building footprint, the entire building must be brought up to code. The entire building needs improvement, so we would be over 50%. Code 907.4.2 states that when more than 30% of the total floor and roof areas require structural alterations within a 5-year period, the entire structure needs to be brought up to code. With the roof in its current condition, it is believed more than 30% will require structural alterations. The issue with bringing Barn 6 up to current code is cost. To dismantle the barn, make improvements, and then put everything back together will cost more than demolishing the existing barn and building a new structure. This has been stated by Kingworks and Carletti Architects. A full cost analysis of this hasn't been completed, and to do so would require extensive analysis of Barn 6 to verify every component needing improvement. This analysis would be very time-consuming and costly. Spaney Buildings, Inc., a pole building contractor, has also reviewed Barn 6 and verified that remodeling it is possible. However, this review also concurred that remodeling would cost more than replacing. A formal estimate wasn't prepared based on this understanding. With this understanding that it is cost prohibitive to remodel versus replace, Sudden Valley has investigated the option to build a new structure. There are 2 preliminary concepts that have been reviewed. Both concepts intend to use the same footprint or close to it. Both intend to keep the same general appearance of being a barn to resemble the existing structure. Concept 1 is to build an enclosed building. A preliminary layout of this is shown in your packet. The preliminary layout was generated for budget purposes only. It is a simple concept that would allow for future build-out. The design includes a new foundation with concrete slab, reception area with an office, bathroom, and then a large open space. As you can see in the picture, a basketball court fits in the middle of the building and large space remains on each side. The building would be fully enclosed with insulation, but contain numerous roll-up doors to provide an open air atmosphere when the weather allows. Building would also be heated. This concept, however, is much more expensive than concept 2. Concept 2 is to build an open air structure. The idea of this is to provide a concrete slab over the full space, a roof, and include bathrooms. The bathrooms would be the only finished out space. The open air structure could easily be added onto in the future to enclose or enclose just portions. Joel will go through specific budget information, but before I'll do a brief explanation on pricing differences between concept 1 and concept 2. Preliminary design and permitting is assumed to be around $30,000. Concept 1 for the enclosed structure would be higher, but if kept to a simple design as shown, it shouldn't be substantially different than concept 2. Demolition of the existing barn is being budgeted at $200,000 for now. In 2017, a quote was received from WRS to demolish the existing building for $92,000, not including sales tax. From a conservative standpoint, we have doubled the bid from 6 years ago. In 2022, concept number 1 for the enclosed building shown came in with an initial engineer's estimate of $2.2 million by Carletti Architects. Concept number 2 is being budgeted at $900,000. This amount is believed to be reasonable for building an open air structure, but an official engineer's estimate hasn't been completed yet. The difference between these 2 concepts is substantial in price. However, both concepts allow for future build-out additions, and both concepts assume approximately the same footprint. I'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, there were some sheds building on barn 6, and there was a question of whether or not those would count in the footprint. Do they, or was that, are you,
I think you're referring to the lean-tos that are on each side, and those do count towards the overall footprint. They count towards the overall footprint of the existing building.
the county has agreed to that?
Yes.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question with, you had said with, the second option would be an open air structure. Would we still keep the little corner where there's bathrooms and an area to get into, be able to reach someone where there's office space and that sort of stuff? Or it would just be open air and people would go to the community center if they needed to get access?
Yeah, it's a good question, Linda. The concept 1 and concept 2 are really just preliminary concepts at this time. Concept 2, with the way I described it, would include a bathroom. It could easily include as much or as little as the board and the community decided they wanted to put in there. If the goal was to include a little office space similar to what that drawing shows in concept 1, that would be an easy addition, I would think.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
again, just for now, there's no set plan that we're moving forward with.
Yeah, it's just gonna be open air. Okay.
Any other questions about the ice barn project in particular?
In terms of concept 2, the open air structure would resemble kind of like would it be a basketball court, do you think? I didn't see a schematic for concept 2. Oh, it's the same. So a basketball court and then it's just open air then.
And the basketball court in the middle is really just to depict and help
see.
people visualize
Whatever it
how
might
large
be.
of a space it is.
Okay.
It could be put on the ground or it could not be. That would just be.
There'd
up
be
to the
no
board to
roof on
decide.
top of it or anything.
Correct.
No, yeah, there'd be a roof.
Be a roof.
Would look just very similar to the building that's there now. Just be an open air pavilion as opposed to a
Oh,
barn.
I see.
Think like Hovander Park,
Oh, okay.
when you drive in there, they have like the big pavilion you can rent and has like a fireplace and things like that. Like kind of a structure similar to that, that's open. There would be obviously a corner, I think, closed off with bathroom.
Okay.
It's like Gail joined us on Zoom.
But there's no wall.
Okay, so I guess if there's no
No
more,
other questions on the ice barn at this point? We'll obviously have more discussion on it as far as budget implications and things like that. Here coming up after we kind of go through the projects.
so also, I just want to apologize. I actually did not introduce Tyler because I know the board knows him, but the community doesn't necessarily, so I apologize for that. But the person that's reviewing these is Tyler Andrews with P&W. He is our construction and project manager that we contract with to oversee these types of things and put them out to bid and give us advice. Thank you. So you can I guess, go ahead and move into the other, the marina.
The marina. A quick recap on the history of the marina. The existing docks were installed in the early 1970s, putting them at approximately 50 years old. An evaluation of the docks was completed in March of 2017 and again in February of 2023 by Ashton Engineering, Inc. Both memos identified the docks to be at the end of their useful lifespan. It is impossible to identify exactly how many more years they might survive and are currently being planned for replacement in 5 years. A preliminary design has been completed to provide an accurate budget forecast for replacement. A few items to note of difference between the existing docks and the new layout. The existing design is curved, which is custom to a typical dock. New design is similar, but includes 2 angle points with straight dock sections to generate the curve. A drawing of the existing and new layouts is shown in your board packet. The new designs adds water and electricity to the docks. This design addition is budgeted at $46,172 in the engineer's estimate, not including sales tax or inflation. This budget is preliminary as no upland investigation work has been completed. The utilities are assumed to be ran to the marina office and assumed connections are available at this location with minimal costs. The new design includes 92 slips versus the existing, which is 88 slips. The new design meets ADA requirements, which requires for a minimum of 3 slips. The west dock is shown to have 4 ADA slips and the east dock will have none. An ADA slip widens the finger dock to a 5-foot width. To meet ADA requirements, a new gangway is planned for the west dock. When the gangways were replaced in 2018, they weren't designed for ADA. East dock is planned to reuse the existing gangway. The existing piles are planned to be removed and reinstalled to meet the new design. The dock design assumes 22-foot length boats at all slips. This is planned to be evaluated when design work officially starts in a couple of years to verify what the actual design length should be. The engineer has assumed the water depth hasn't changed since it was surveyed in 2017. Prior to this project moving forward with design work, a new survey is anticipated to be completed to verify the depth is consistent. Open it up for questions. Go ahead, Linda.
So we've got the existing, that's the standpipe and the fire, or the fire stuff that goes in there. Is that going to be affected by this new design?
Those will be reused to the greatest extent they can. They will get fully dismantled and then installed on the new docks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because of the design, something would need to change with the ones that we just put in there.
Correct. And it's believed the engineer thinks they can reuse the majority of that system.
So the other question I have is, will you once again explain the ADA slips, please?
So the ADA slips, because Sudden Valley's open to the public, it has to follow ADA rules. To make an ADA slip, in the case of the docks, the finger dock, which is what the boats parallel to and tie up to, just need to be a 5-foot width. So they're slightly larger than the traditional finger dock. And based on the number of boats Sudden Valley has, ADA rules require 3. But because if you widen 2 finger docks to get 5 feet, you'll end up with 4 boats having the capacity on that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Timmy.
What is the problem with the existing docks? I'm not aware of what the issue is with them.
Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
I'm just not sure what the problem is with the existing docks. I mean, they appear on the surface to be fine. I'm just not sure when you say they're near the end of their useful life, what is the issue?
I'd have to pull up the engineers provided 2 memos that I think the board has been provided. And if not, I can easily resend those again. Essentially some of the concrete is starting to spall in locations. I know some of the timbers, some of the fasteners are reaching the end of their life where things are just wearing out. I'd have to pull those reports up to look at the exact specifics of why he's identifying this.
So the engineering report that he's talking about, there were 2 different ones. One, I think, came from 2017 from the same engineering group. It's what we had in our board packet when we approved this new review and what do you call it? A memo or a report. So we can have Joanne just resend that to everybody, but it was in the packet when we approved this to go out and come back with this estimate, because one of the things that we discovered is that these docks were not in the reserve study at the appropriate amount. And so in order for us to budget correctly to replace them, we needed to have them reviewed and an engineer report and memo done on them.
Does anyone other than Timmy want to receive that information again?
We've already got it in a prior packet, correct?
Yes, Linda?
Go ahead.
Will you repeat what you said about the water depth in the marina, that's remained consistent since 2017?
When the engineer did his site walk, it looked like the depths from when they'd done the hydraulic survey in 2017 before the spit was, the sheet pile and that was replaced and the fire standpipes put in. They did a survey. At just a quick guess with his tape, not guess, quick verification with his tape measure off the docks, it looked like the depths remain about the same. And he's basing that on where the water table was at the days he was there. The idea is before design officially starts in a couple years, that there would actually be a survey done to verify that we're not putting docks in, and in fact, there's been sediment buildup or any issues that would need to be addressed before dock replacement.
I know for a while we were getting milfoil in there. And it was, kind of narrowing things a little bit because it was so dense and everything. Another thing I wondered about, and I know this is completely off topic, what about all those tires that do the inside of the spit?
So the tires would be proposed to come out as part of this project. And the reason for that is, and the reason they were ultimately left in there in 2018 was to save them for future projects down at the marina where we needed to mitigate.
I've lived here since 1996. I've always longed to see them gone. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess no other questions on that. Thank you, Tyler. So Joel will be presenting the recommended SURF 2024. What is that? And Joel will be presenting the recommended SURF 2024 capital budget and 10-year capital plan. As you will see, this budget includes both the ice barn replacement and the replacement of the marina wet dock slips. This budget fulfills the board's obligation to maintain existing assets without additional capital assessment increases to members. Basically, the recommended capital budget ensures that no special assessment or increase in capital dues are required over the next 10-year period. The recommended budget provides an estimated $900,000 for the replacement of the ice barn with an open-air pavilion. This does not include separate budgets identified for design and permitting and demolition. Demolition under this budget is proposed for 2025 and new construction in 2026. The Marina Docks replacement project is scheduled for 2028. The engineer's estimated actual replacement cost for the wet slip docks is now estimated at $1.5 million. And under this, there would be 92 wet slips available upon completion. Due to the replacement costs being significantly underestimated for many years in the reserve study, we are recommending the underfunded amount of approximately $1.3 million be offset with increased user fees in the amount of an additional $1,200 annually to be levied on each of the wet slips. These additional funds will be obligated and set aside in SURF to be used towards the replacement of the marina wet slip docks. Once the marina wet slip docks are replaced, the increased use fee will be generating additional reserves to replace these docks again in approximately 30 years. So this is part of the long-range planning process that we discussed. So we're trying to make sure that we're looking forward and protecting and sustaining the community. Several funding scenarios were discussed. Although this is the budget we recommend be placed on the ballot, we are also recommending the board place advisory measures on the ballot to allow for member input on these decisions. While an advisory vote is not binding on a board, it allows the membership's position to be documented, providing the board appropriate guidance on a decision that impacts the future of an existing asset. The advisory votes will consist of the same questions weighed by management when determining our budget recommendation. On the ice barn replacement, we suggest an advisory vote that reads, Which of the following options do you prefer to address the disrepair of the ice barn? Remove existing structure and replace with an open air pavilion, not requiring a special assessment for funding. Remove the existing structure and replace with an enclosed structure paid for through a special assessment. Remove the existing structure and do not replace. On the marina wet slip docks, the advisory vote question that we're suggesting and recommending is, what funding approach do you prefer the association to take regarding the replacement of the marina wet slip docks? Increase wet slip use fees, an additional $1,200 per slip per year to fund a portion of the wet slip docks replacement. Place a special assessment on all members to fund the replacement. Do not replace docks when useful life is over. Because no increase in capital assessments is proposed in 2024, the advisory vote will have no impact on the 2024 capital budget. So Joel, you want to? And so Joel's going to move into the SURF budget presentation. This is Joel Heverling. He is our finance director.
Minimize this. No. Here. Why that's in the middle? You pull it down.
Okay, so Tyler covered the project. So we talked about the engineering aspects of it. So I'll quickly go over the budget. And obviously I'm just doing the SURF right now, then I'll come back and do roads a little later. So
Can you pull your mic just a little closer? Thank you.
there. So all of you have in your packets the SURF capital planning spreadsheet. Now, of course, Sonia did mention the docs at 2028. I guess one little snafu, I guess you could say, is the docs are actually, what we have in this planning is for it to be done in 2029. So unfortunately, your sheets will it cuts off at 2028. We were trying to make it as big as possible to see it, but it became a casualty.
I'm sorry, that was actually my fault. I didn't even realize I did that.
Big margin.
But of course, many of you have seen this capital spreadsheet before. And I'll just go over just the layout of the spreadsheet real quick. So basically what you're seeing here is 2024 right here, this January 1 carryover amount, this 976,858. So what this includes is this is already taking into account what our cash reserves are, like right now, plus everything in this 2023 column right here. So this is everything that the board has either already approved or they could approve this year, or, on this capital planning spreadsheet. So if all this stuff was done, including Barn 8 and all this stuff, then this would be the January 1 carryover amount that you'd be looking at right now. And then obviously it's the same for each individual year. And then we factor in, here are the dues, the expected dues. And then I just did this at 95% collection rate again, based off of how many lots we have, which is 3,121. I'll get into this dock fee increase amount, this 105,600 right here, just a little bit. We just have some estimated interest in here, just a conservative amount. And then it adds in the previous year's carry back to 600,000. So that's just the amount that basically board would not like to drop below for the SURF account. So actually, if I go all the way down, then obviously it's tabulating, adding up all these expenses. But then at the end of 2024, you could see, so I'll just talk about this, then I'll go back up. But at the end, you could see, like it's repeating right here, the total expenditures for the year, 1.32 million in this case. And then this is giving you the year-end reserve balance after all these expenditures. So it's basically what that's doing is taking the 2.97 million from here and it's subtracting off all these expenditures. And this is what we're expecting basically what this is telling you is that's how much cash, we're expecting to have at the end of 2024 in our SURF account, 1.65 million. And then I'm repeating again, the target reserve board recommended carryover 600,000. So then after that, the amount that we would usable cash be after that carryover amount would be 1,050,162. And then then obviously this amount, 1,050,006 or 162, there you see there pops up again for next year's carryover. And then the process continues all the way through this 10-year spreadsheet, which of course you're only seeing 5 years just because we were trying to get the font as big as possible. Otherwise it would have been really small. So just going through this spreadsheet real quick, I'll just touch on the highlights. Obviously what we have on here, and so basically Joanne covered the 2023 stuff for the most part. Here you're seeing all the barn expenditures with updated costs from Tyler. So that's how much we could end up spending on this barn in 2023, or that we anticipate ending to spend, the exterior envelope, HVAC, bridge entrance out front, just so on and so forth. And then at the very top, you also see these SURF loan repayments. So that's the total amount. Well, that's exactly the total amount of payments that we're going to make for the SURF loan that we have right now. That the board approved to come out of the SURF account. And then, okay. Just quickly. Okay, good. So I froze this so you can see the years here. So then basically just scrolling through this. So now you can see line item by line item, everything that's going to be, and by the way, so all this stuff has been reported to the reserve study company. Of course, one thing that was kind of holding up the show a little bit was the roads memo that obviously we have now, and which is why we have a road spreadsheet as well. So the reserve study company, they probably have this stuff now for at least solid couple weeks. So we expect a draft back hopefully any time now. But so the stuff that you see is the stuff that has been reported to the reserve study companies. So this will be our reserve study that basically that you see. You just see it in Excel format at this point. But obviously, because we report to them all these updated costs that we now know about, like the A21 and the bridge and the roads from the roads memo. But you can now see line by line all of this stuff. Just hitting on some highlights would be, and this happens every single year when we do this planning, because obviously we do this planning with the department managers, with Tyler's input in terms of asking them, well, what's the status of equipment or buildings or whatever, and does something really need to be done this year, or could it be pushed off to another year or whatever? Or they'll even tell us, I notice this trucks that it should be replaced in 2025, but this will easily last until 2028, whatever. We don't drive it very much. So then we'll naturally move stuff if we don't actually have to spend money on something. And by the way, whenever we move anything from one year to the other, so what's built into the spreadsheet is the inflation rate, which is a component of this whole spreadsheet. And last year on the reserve study, we used 4%. And just to be conservative, we're using 4% again this year on these spreadsheets. So if something, with the exception of something that's not going to change, like SURF loan payments, obviously, but if anything moves from one year to the next, then 4% gets tacked onto that, an assumed inflation rate. Like a good example, something that we might move from one year to the next, like adult center HVAC replacement, which is this exterior building painting, this water heater replacement. That stuff was scheduled to be done in 2023, but it doesn't need to be done this year. So we pushed it off to 2024 to do along with this interior renovation, 41,600 at expiration of lease. And there are a couple of things in here. Well, I'll talk about it when I get up to it. And then you see things like quiet pool fence, clubhouse, and Okay, so here's perfect. Like, for example, clubhouse type components. So there's some components like you saw with the library, with the adult center, and then you'll see it again here with the clubhouse and also with the kitchen equipment elements. But basically just for planning purposes, we just schedule this stuff at the current, the current lease expirations. That has no bearing on renewing a lease or whatever, but we just to be conservative, schedule it for the end of the lease to do these things. Okay, now since we're down into the golf area, so like now this is one area where Brian really gave us a lot of input. So some things that if you really went through this in detail and looked at it line item by line item, you would notice more irrigation stuff popping up, and that's because what we did is Brian identified not just lump sum irrigation units, but what he did is he broke it down into component units for irrigation systems and the expected replacement year for each individual component. So we've really broken out with Brian's input the irrigation system for the golf course and listed it on here according to with his examination of these elements when he believes it would be replaced. So that's another good example of where like we're taking managers' input and making material changes to the reserve study to pull it more in line with maybe not just what it said, but what in reality, when we would really need to do what and what component. Now, this turf building stuff, here's another good example, talking to Greg, like a lot of these elements or components were listed in 2023 column, and then talking to him, he felt it was perfectly fine to just go ahead and push this for now, even to 2024. We didn't feel it really needed to be done in 2023. So that's another element with golf where the manager's input just changed our capital planning with it. There's areas tall barn that was mentioned right here. Okay, so what I do want to get down to, since I'm already, let me just talk, talk about the ice barn here real quick, but this is where you see the ice barn and then the discussion around the pavilion to replace the ice barn with. But so there's that 200,000 for 2025. And that's just like Tyler said, basically we're doubling the 27 estimate just to be conservative on how much that would cost to tear this whole thing down. And you'll see in 2024 where we budgeted 30,000 next year for the design and of the pavilion itself, I believe. Or was this also part of the tear down planning as well? 30,000.
Design and permit.
The 30,000 would include the preparation for a demolition permit.
Okay. Yeah. And then there's the $900,000 amount in 2026 for the actual construction of the pavilion itself. And now going back to the marina wet slip. Okay. Let me just highlight it here.
And we can send, when this, the digital version comes out, we'll send the full, surf and road spreadsheets for the next 10 years. So like I said, I altered this just because it was so hard to read. But we'll send it out digitally.
So the marina wet slip, we have 2023, we have 12,188 for design. And that's what that amount, what Tyler, that 12,188 for, that's
That's done the evaluation and preliminary design concept drawing with preliminary engineer's estimate.
And then you can see in 2029. So what do we have here? So the marina dock itself. Of course, now keep in mind, this is tacking inflation onto it. So I believe it was. Let me just
1.5. 1.5, but that's today's rate. So like Joel was explaining, our system sets it to an inflation rate annually of 4%.
So it's about 1,496,000 right now for like if we were to do that wet slip today. But of course, keep in mind this spreadsheet is applying a 4% inflationary rate for each one of these years. Which is exactly what the reserve study report will do as well. So that's what pushes this cost to 1,892,725. Now, this is where before what was talked about with that with the proposal for a talk around like a fee increase to help for the marina. So that's where it's worked into this spreadsheet where you can see it up above this dock fee increase to reserve collection. So what this would be is it would be a fee increase on the wet slips, the 88 wet slips that are currently there through since this construction will be, or the replacement of 2029. So this is the 1,200 times by 88, which is coming up to 105,600 for 2024 through 2029. And then you'll notice in 2030 through 2033, that amount goes up. And that's because when the docks are constructed, then we'll have 92 slips at that point. So then it's 92 slips at 1,200. But what this is doing is this is directly, obviously, the amount of the portion of this fee increase would only go to the reserve. So the surf reserves for the purpose of this dock replacement. So now with this fee increase, basically the bottom line is then this dock. So the 1,892,000 for the dock replacement in 2029. So what was on the reserve study was the original amount was 187,177. So basically the difference of that 1,705,000, those fees would essentially pay for this dock in about 15 and a half years. So then the fees would be paid for. And then if the fees is kept in place, so then these docks again would be on the dock to replace once again in approximately 2060 for now. And those fees would then reaccumulate to another balance of 2.24 million to go towards the replacement of the docks in 2060 as well. Now, Tyler also mentioned he felt that the docks at that point, maybe with inflation could, it could get to 3 million for the replacement. Of course, that's quite a ways off before we know that. But the good thing is with those fees is that you'd be able to bank quite a bit of money into the surf account to solely go to replace those docks. Now, a couple of questions, a couple of people have asked me is, well, if you did this through dues, what would that mean if dues paid for the dock replacement? And this is just on the additional amount needed, that 1.7 million. Well, I mean, if you did it in 1 year, obviously you can't do it in 1 year through dues, but if you did, that'd be $47.94. If you did it out over 6 years, like with a special assessment dues increase, then that would increase dues by $7.99. Now, if you were to do it out over, say, 15 years, and you would be looking at $3.20 an increase to dues. So then the next question would be, well, let's just say you increase dues for 6 years through a special assessment, then you'd be increasing your dues payment by 5.63% over 6 years. Over 15 years, it'd be 2.26%. Obviously, in 1 year, it'd be 33.8%. Obviously, you can't do that like with the SGM that was passed in 2019. But that basically gives you kind of a feeling for this. We're done through dues and not through a fee increase, how the dues would look. Now, if it's just done through a fee increase on those marina slips, obviously then the dues would have nothing to do with it at that point.
So the other thing that's important to remember is by doing this, if you did do it either via a special assessment or that the entire amount was onto the membership, that doesn't allow us to be able to increase our annual dues enough to offset just normal inflation rates. We're really limited. And like Joel was saying, it's a long period of time to be paying that off before we can actually make it work. So let's say we have, something else that we need to put money into, we're not going to be able to. And so that's why we're recommending to do it like this. This is a conservative budget, ensuring that there will not be a special assessment and these items will be taken care of. But we're doing it in a way that is fair. It's even though like on the docks, the members are offsetting some of those fees. It is a use fee that goes primarily to the people that are the 88 wet slips that are receiving the benefit. That's what it is. 88 people receive benefit, and that's $1.5 million. That's a tremendous burden on the entire community. And so that's why we're recommending to kind of share those expenses with the people that are receiving the benefit. And as Joel expressed, moving forward, this then it starts to budget properly moving forward so that when those docks need additional work or replacement, the money's saved, then it won't, it just goes into the reserve study properly and into our capital planning properly, so that we shouldn't have, it's 30 or 35 years off, something could happen, but.
How can we make the wet slip process fair? Can't you hear me?
Yeah,
Oh, it's not.
I heard you.
You heard me. That's all.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt, Joel. I was just going. You can finish.
No, it works.
Those, another thing too, those dues amounts that I just gave you, those examples, those all obviously also don't factor in the dock replacement, which would most likely have to be done again around 2060 or later as well. Now, the rest of the SURF capital planning, just the first part was basically facilities, obviously, but then the second part is equipment. The good thing is there's nothing really completely out of the ordinary with the equipment. It's all pretty much standard stuff. There is the kitchen equipment stuff that we talked about before, like replacing at the end of like a lease term, and that's just for conservative planning. And then this is also like another category we really heavily rely on, like the department managers, especially with these vehicles in terms of the replacement, like what the current condition of these vehicles are, whether or not they need to be replaced in a certain year that it said before. So some of these have been moved out just solely based off of the recommendation of the department managers, obviously mainly Greg and Perf and Mike there in maintenance. And another thing we've done too, and this is a request of department managers, is we've broken off some things, meaning like we're trucks, a truck might have a plow with a truck. So instead of it just saying, like when we take it into the fixed asset system, it's going to be capitalized as a truck plow combination. And then in a couple areas, like, based off of Mike's input, he wanted the truck and the plow split off as components in the reserve study. So, because obviously a plow could come up for replacement before a truck. So we've done those types of changes as well. But and also the playground ADA compliance, you'll see here, phase 1 here and another phase in 2025 as well. And then, but the bottom line is with all of these component units, with all the docks, the pavilion, the ice barn, like demolition. So you can see like the bottom line is how much money we would have at the end of each individual year based off of this plan. You can see that the SURF fund, This is even, this bottom line is after that 600,000 has been subtracted from it, that carryback amount. The actual cash balance would look like this, the bold number, but you can see that it's the lowest year would be so far according to this plan be 2029, which is no mystery that it's the dock really dragging down that year, even with all those fees. But so then we'd have about 650,000 or 651,000 at the end of 2029, and then it starts to go up again from 2030 out over this 10-year plan.
Or you'd have 1.25, you're just counting the 600,000 carryover.
Yeah, if you just ignore that carryback, just the amount that you would like not to fall below, then this bold number is how much cash, actual cash we would expect to have in the reserve account. I guess in a nutshell, that would cover like the SURF components of this 10-year capital plan. If anyone had any questions about this. Yes, Nancy?
Yeah, Joel, a tricky question. Is it possible that the dry slip renters are actually subsidizing the wet slip renters by the way the fee is structured?
Well, I
This
mean,
new fee, you're talking about the additional 1,200 fee or the current fee?
With the
So this is the capital budget, and so all we're talking about doing is increasing an additional use fee on the 88 wet slips of $1,200. So that's all reserves. So it's very similar to when you pay your dues assessment, and approximately half of it goes to operations and half will go to reserves. So the same will happen with the wet slip users. So they'll pay their regular tenant fees, and then on top of that, there will be additional $1,200 annually, and that will all go to reserve. It'll go into SURF on a line item. Is that kind of
yeah,
what you're asking?
the current fee structure right now, all those fees go to operations. So none of those fees go to capital.
I just wonder about the balance between what the dry slip people pay and the wet slip people pay, because it just seems like most people would want a wet slip. I think that's probably the longest wait list.
Yeah, it is.
And I wonder what it is, how it was differentiated between the two groups. Like, that's way broad for this discussion.
Well, I'm not 100% sure. I don't understand the question. I don't think, but one of the things that's been discussed and it's come up in our board meeting, and we'll do that. We'll talk about that more in our planning process for next year. But is to implement a lottery on a certain percentage of those to begin to make that more fair, especially if we're going to be increasing these reserves onto those slips. Then we need to, we don't want to just put it on the same group over and over. We want to kind of, let's I don't know, I'm just using an example. You could take 30% of the people, the GM will have to figure that out, but let's say 30% can go into a lottery, right? And then we can just do that every year, and it becomes a little bit more fair. I think that's what you were kind of getting at. I'm sorry, Nancy, I'm not 100% sure what the question was.
I mean,
I have always heard that the marina was the one thing that made money for Sudden Valley. And when I see this feed structure, I wonder if that's true anymore. Is it just being run on a break-even basis?
Well, this particular item is something that it was not planned for properly. It was in the reserve study. It's been in the reserve study forever, I think, but it was at about $175,000. So, that's the problem. We were off by $1.3 million. And what actually, Tyler actually identified the fact that when he was dealing with the marina boat launch dock, that there were a couple of issues, one being that those gangways were not ADA compliant. And I think speaking with the engineer, you can probably give the background, Tyler, but that engineer that was out here in 2017 mentioned that we needed more money, a significant amount more money than what we had been planning.
Okay, so I was mistaken that the marina actually made money for Sudden Valley. I don't remember where I heard
No,
that. But it was somebody's very sincere statement.
I mean, on an operational basis, yes, they contribute more money than their expenditures operationally wise. So actually, operationally wise, they kind of like decrease. They have a tendency to like suppress dues increases a little, because of that. Meaning since they have an operational net income, well, that's exactly what they have, which then actually feeds into like the whole budget picture to see how much dues really need to be to balance out everything across the organization.
And we'll look at that more next week. We're going to go into the operational budget, and so that'll help explain some of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say, I wasn't sure if this was answering your question, Nancy, or not, but wet slips are considerably more expensive than dry slips.
Absolutely. And they should be, at least when I look at the budget.
Linda?
Pathetically humor me here. So let's say I'm a current wet slip person that rents and I rent for $1,000 a year right now. What's it gonna be with the 105? What additional monies am I gonna pay per year for that slip based on this $105,000 if there's 88 slips?
So $1,200 annually, and it'd be equal no matter the size of your slip or your boat.
So that's gonna be that $1,200 increase, no matter, because some of the wet slips are they're different. There's a regular wet slip, correct?
Yeah, but
And
it's just pay for the replacement. So it's to make it, number one, fair, because everybody benefits equally from the replacement of those marina wet slip docks.
Okay.
So it
I
doesn't
just wanted
matter
to
what
make
size
sure
the
that
boat.
that was clear, that if all of a sudden, instead of paying $1,000, I'm gonna be.
Yeah, it'll be
I
12.
understand. And I'm just saying sometimes that can have an impact where all of a sudden you find an empty marina. We tried that one year doing a really large increase, not anything be like this. And it was huge. But anyway,
Well, that's one of the reasons
understand
that
what
we
you're-
recommend the advisory vote, because that's going to allow the members to actually give some guidance on that of what they really, the direction that they want it to go in. Instead of us guessing.
I got what you're saying. It's just I wanted to be sure I understood exactly what was being said. The other thing I had a question about is I'm looking back at the 2023 surf. And there's some things on there. One of them I'm gonna hit on is the $40,000 that was allocated for and it's at end of life, the clubhouse the HVAC. Last year it was at $40,000. It has now jumped to like 80-some thousand dollars. So a little bit more than a 4% increase.
That's where, so Mike, our maintenance supervisor, superintendent, he's gotten actual bids from HVAC companies of that's what the replacement is. That's more in line with what the actual replacement
Okay,
cost is.
I
gonna
just
be.
was wondering, because it's when you try and compare some of this stuff that we haven't done or we aren't going to do this year and we're moving it out the next year, there's some real variance going on there.
Yeah, what we
Yep.
did, like, if you guys remember, like, last year, we worked really hard to start to bring the reserve study in alignment with this 10-year plan. Unfortunately, we couldn't 100% do it because Joel decided he was going to get COVID. And so, and our reserve specialist, remember, came out and he got sick. And so we actually could not complete, the update last year. So all of our department managers spent a lot of time this year really going through everything on here. They inventoried all of their equipment and their
Yeah, every item on the study was found and confirmed and then evaluated. And so the numbers that were in the reserve study, which were equal to what is now or was also in the capital planning, they were all evaluated against actual condition. So a significant number of changes were made to that based on those assessments.
Has that reserve study been made available? I'm assuming you updated the reserve study also, correct?
Oh, well, that's the draft that they're working on right now.
Okay,
So-
so it's still sitting out there because the only
Yeah.
thing I could find was from last year.
Yeah.
So it'll look like the have the same figures, that what Joel is showing you here, but yeah, hopefully we'll have that, fingers crossed, we'll have the draft next week because they've had it for a few weeks. So we're trying to get that draft, but it'll be finished up definitely before we finalize anything.
Yeah, like for example, like barn A components, like there's another good example, kind of like that HVAC where exterior envelope, well, that used to be 750,000, now it's 821 based off of updated estimates, given to us by Tyler. So there are a few items in here that we updated literally just, like a week ago. So so when I get that draft back, it's gonna, of course, I always send it. I've never had a draft pass, and oh yeah, they did everything I told them to do. Like, so it's gonna go back again anyways, but then there'll be some other changes that I'll have and
It's
make as
just
well.
curious to go back over both spreadsheets and look and see that there's some places where there's significant changes by work that we've put off that now we're gonna move it into 24 or whatever. That there's some serious changes there from those numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically, like if something just goes from one column to another and that 4% inflation is going to affect it. And if it's if it doesn't, meaning if it's higher than that, and we had
It is what it is.
an estimate, yeah, that,
It is what it is.
Yeah.
So we worked really hard because one of the things that we found over the last couple of years, again, is that these numbers, as you saw this year, these numbers are coming in significantly higher than what we had planned and budgeted for and everything. And so we're really trying to keep a close eye on that and make sure that we're saving appropriately and that we've got the right amount of reserves. There were items that were in here, just like last year, that they have been decommissioned or whatever you want to call them, and they were removed. And then, all of the purchases that we approved this year got added. So, but we are trying to make sure that those numbers are legitimate, right? And that we can plan appropriately.
When you're saying there's gonna be no increase in the amount that people are paying into SURF over in years, correct? Are we assuming at least a 95% collection rate? And that's where you get those numbers?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And again, this is because some of the new board members might, as I explained at the beginning, we just do a budget for 1 year, but we need to actually plan for the association and for the long range. And so that's really kind of all we can do, is estimate that and assume that there will be no dues increase.
Gotcha. Just, it's part of our assumptions.
So I guess I'll chime in here and give some thoughts. I think it's great to see a budget and have a 10-year plan that's funded for all the expenses that we anticipate. I think it would be great to replace Barn 6 and being able to do that without raising dues. I'm certainly more in favor of an open air pavilion. I think it provides us a lot more flexibility than a closed building does. And a closed building, would require a significant business plan on how we would use such space if it's enclosed. I think an open air structure, provides recreation and market and, place for we have craft fairs and things like that occasionally. I think the marina docks, I think it's a good plan. I think it provides funding so that the docks get replaced. One of the complaints we do here is that, the marina contributes to the operations budget, but then things aren't being replaced down here. And that, this plan solves that problem. And while it does require the people who use the wet slips to pay some additional money. The membership is contributing to the replacement of those docks as well. I guess I'm curious, if, we started this annual $1,200 increase next year, what is the funding percentage like? We get to 2029, those fees will cover this much of the project and the membership would cover.
Jay, we're having a hard time hearing you.
I'm asking the question with the $1,200 increase, if it started next year, the project to replace the docks is planned for 2029. What is the percentage of funding that 1,200 would increase towards that marina project?
It's a,
And then how much are the members contributing for this replacement? And then I thought you said, I just wanted to confirm this. Moving forward, 30 years out from that replacement or whatever, the 1,200 would likely be enough to cover the total costs? Or would there still be membership?
So it's like 528,000, is that correct?
Well, yeah, by 2060, then we would have another 2,240,000 approximately saved up again, just from the increase in the marina fees. And Tyler was, because I just talked to him literally before I sat in this chair here, and he was thinking that maybe by 2060, possibly 3 million in replacement costs, but of course, it's quite a long ways out. But
What AJ was saying is like, there's 88 wet slips, and if we charge them 1,200 a year, we're talking approximately 528,000 or so, Joel, correct? By the time it's time to pay that. So the members would be paying 2/3 pretty much, and then
Yeah.
the wet slip owners would be paying 1/3.
I mean,
the
that's
cost.
almost right on. So we'd have 33%, through these fees through 2029 of the dock replacement. Then the rest would be paid back, through these fees. Well, if we start collecting in 2024, then in about 15 and a half years, we'll have the whole thing paid for, basically. That's the 1.7 million, the additional amount over what we originally had in here, the 187,000.
Yeah, what he's basically saying, because we calculated this out, is by the time you need another one, those funds that will next time when you need another one, those funds will pay for it. You won't have to go, the board at that time will not have to go to the membership. It'll have been in the reserves and it'll be fully funded at that point.
Sam?
I have one question that, increase. We are assuming that we will rent all of those spaces or collect for all of them and they'll be full and we'll be collecting that full amount and say, so all these numbers are calculated on full use. And that's taken for granted that people will pay that more, that pay more for those fees. I mean, so we are calculating everything on full slip.
Yeah.
Figuring that our demand for that would pay that.
We are.
Joanne?
We have a lengthy wait list with more than 50 people on it for wet slips. Some of those people have been on the waiting list for a decade or more. Also, although we had a significant increase last year of about 20% on fees for the marina, we saw a little bit more turnover in slips than we had in the previous 2 years, but less than a dozen changed hands. So the 20% increase was simply absorbed by our current customers. It didn't appreciably change who was renting them. The other question that I often get about wet slips is, why don't we just limit it to people in the community so more community members can get access to the docks? And we looked at that and there are only 2 people renting wet slips currently who are not members. So by far the lion's share of the slips are held by community members, and many of them have had those slips for a very, very long time.
Yeah, just a quick question. Do we have a priority over full-time residents versus, someone who just uses this for a vacation home? I'm just curious.
No, Keith, but that certainly could be considered. The waiting list is just first come, first serve, however long you've been on it. When a slip comes up, it's offered to the next person on the list. But apparently, people don't always take them because sometimes the wet slip that's offered them isn't in a spot on the dock that they want, like maybe it's at the end or something.
Yeah,
But then
well,
they're given the opportunity to say, no, I don't want it, but I want to stay on the list. And so they stay in the first position, but then that opening is added to the next person in the line.
Yeah, the reason why some boats don't fit in certain slips is because the berth is much wider. The beam on the boats.
Yeah.
So if you have two wide boats together, they won't fit in some of the slips out there. So that's why.
Oh, the other thing I should say is that when, I know it's not necessarily comparable, but if you look at what slip fee rentals are at the Port of Bellingham, they get up in that same area. So if you're paying 1,000 for a wet slip now, a premium slip, that would become 2,200 with the increase, which is a huge increase and a big number. But you're paying more than that to moor your boat if you're owning a reasonable sized boat in the Port of Bellingham.
Yeah, I get that. And with the design, you get a lot more features in places like that. You can spend the night out there, you can plug in, you can drain your boat, you can empty your head and stuff like that. So there's a big reason for that.
So this new design, when they do replace it in 2029,
If it
so
gets
it's gonna
replaced.
have electricity and
Yeah, I saw
water.
that. Yeah.
So, I don't think that we are.
I know, but you'll be charging for all that now without supplying it. It was already hard to get an increase without a launch dock. You know what I mean? It was like you raise it and trash cans are gone. You can't empty the trash anymore. No launch ramp and the fees went up. It's like, yeesh.
And yet the slips are completely full
I
and
know, I get it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt people.
Well, 88 people. And again, the alternative is we could get rid of the marina and have a lake feature that's usable for the entire community instead of 88 people.
Like what?
Some sort of bigger swimming area in there or something. I don't know exactly, but more beach access.
You could conceivably have more dry slips and we even another 2 launches, like an additional boat launch, even it would be less expensive, for the community. But we would be able to create more dry slips if we needed to, and everything. So, I mean, if we had to, it still works. You still have at least 1 launch and conceivably we would be able to afford a second one if for some reason the community said, yeah, we don't want to fund it. Or you know what I mean? If everybody felt like that was just too much, if we're seeing that, the truth is that's what it's going to cost. So it's a matter of how are we going to pay for it? We can't change how much it's going to cost. So I think we're going to find out pretty quick with these advisory votes. And then also let's say that it does come down to the membership decided, yeah, let's increase it 1,200. Then if we see that everybody's leaving and they don't want to pay that, well, we're going to have to reevaluate. Do we keep that marina? Because the truth is we can't replace it if we can't bring in some additional revenue to pay for it. Those are just all things the board's going to have to deal with.
And I think the plan strikes a fair compromise between membership and users.
All right. So does anybody have any other questions on that portion, on the surf part? Because if you don't, go ahead.
Just one last question. This is a hard number on how much this whole reconfiguration is going to cost, because we're basing a lot of assumptions off that. So this is a hard and fast number.
No, there's no such thing as a hard and fast number
know
at
what-
a concept
Yeah,
level.
You know what I'm saying? I'm
It's a
saying this is
conceptual
gonna
level
increase.
planning estimate. It's, Ideally, at that level, they have enough contingency built into there that it would only be less. Obviously Joel's building increased in contingency in there because of how far out in the future the work's planned for. So, you know,
I'm
I
just
think
saying, if you're
it
putting it-
gives you a ballpark number for a project. There's a lot of details that gotta get worked out to come to a hard and fast number, and you need to be at like a 90% design to have something like that.
But what kind of a number do you need if you're having an advisory board, an advisory vote of the membership?
So
That's my point. There should be a relatively decent expectation of the number that we're talking about, correct?
you want to,
Yeah, I mean, it's an engineer's estimate put together by an engineer. It's no different than what Impact's gonna do for all of our road projects. You know, all of those culvert 10 years from now, they're just anticipating, you know, and it's a planning level cost. I mean, that's where we're at in this stage. You know, it's gonna take probably, I don't know, maybe Tyler can correct me, but I bet it'll take 2 years to design and permit this thing before you can even build it, you know, and so like, you know, at the county, when we're putting together our 6-year transportation improvement plans and stuff, those projects that are slated for construction, you know, in the next year, we obviously have like more hard numbers for those and stuff, but the stuff that's 6 years out, you know, we're probably just taking, here's how many linear feet of asphalt we're laying and have a number per linear foot that we average off of old projects, and that's how we're planning it. And as that project continues to come closer to being constructed in that like next year that's being
What
proposed,
cost?
that cost continues to refine as it gets closer to its date of construction.
thank you, AJ.
Just one more quick thing on the docks. Has there been any thought about jet ski? Potential rental for jet ski dockage? I just see a lot more jet skis, this year than I did last year and so forth. This seems to be becoming more popular. I didn't know if that, could be squeezed in, maybe get some more rental that way. I don't know. Just something to think about.
I mean, I think stuff like that can get hammered out through a design process.
Yep, I don't know. That was it.
One of the things I'll just, you guys may have noticed that the arms are angled and they're not curved. And if you're like me, because I'm like, hey, I like the curve on the arms, but just like Tyler pointed out to me, though, those are custom made, and they will increase the cost significantly if we do something like this, where the design that the engineers recommended is one that'll it's cost efficient and give us the same effect as the current design. Okay, so if there's no more questions, Joanne will give us an overview of the 2023 roads projects.
$35,000 each. Special assessment. Well, we got one coming up on Hawaii. Place in fall or something ridiculous. It's not even that old of a building. I was like, where's the lawsuit? Somebody you're suing someone over the phone.
Joel,
Yeah.
so where's the cursor?
That's only gonna be like a couple grand, right? So it's a big difference. Oh, the new dock looks great. I mean, they're gonna put electric and
I know it's
water,
there because stuff is.
plumbing, trash cans.
There's a huge
I just don't think it's like ice people out. Fighting this and just pop up
No.
like rich people would have it. That shouldn't be that way either.
It's not really fair if you've been sitting there
No.
for 10 years. And
I know. You
It just got on.
All right, so everyone's favorite, roads.
And you're paying the third of it, right? All the existing.
My assignment is to review all of the current roads projects. So I'll start with famous culvert C 315. This project is expected to start on August 14th and be completed at the end of September. And just as we had a little table summarizing all of the SURF capital projects that are current, we also have a little table summarizing all of our current roads projects, which you can see on the slide there. The 2023 culvert cleaning was a big project for us this year. It touched almost every homeowner. People saw us out in the streets working hard to improve drainage. That work started in February and was finished in April. The inlet and outlet of culverts have also been cleared to ensure positive drainage. Remember, that was our second big effort towards drainage, and that work was completed in June. I can tell you that many people have come into the Welcome Center for one reason or another, and many of them have mentioned that they appreciate that we have done so much work on the culverts and ditches. Cold Spring drainage repair design is complete, and we're waiting for the permit to be issued. Construction will begin in September if permits are received in time. If not, the project will have to be delayed until summer of 24 when the Lake Wacom watershed reopens. The 10-year roads and drainage plan. Impact design started the road and drainage evaluation process in February, and that is complete. A draft plan is expected by the end of August and will be finalized by October. As part of that planning project, Impact Design prepared a detailed memo outlining the projects that they recommend for 2024, and the capital budget and roads reserve study will include those recommended projects. So we have aligned the capital planning and the reserve study with the new recommendations. So that is the set of current projects, and Tyler is going to talk a little bit about Impact Design's memo and how it was used in planning.
Thank you, Joanne. The majority of Sudden Valley's infrastructure was built during the 1970s. The infrastructure consists of primarily two components: drainage to include culverts and ditches, and then the roads. As a whole, very few of the existing culverts installed approximately 50 years ago have been replaced. Some roads in Sudden Valley have received asphalt improvements, and others are still original. Given the age of the infrastructure, many items are at or approaching the end of their life cycles. Earlier this year, Sudden Valley contracted with Impact Design to update the 10-year capital plan. A few components have gone into this. Dremler Gravel was contracted to clean all of the culverts to allow for inspection. Prior to this, many culverts were full of debris from years of neglect. Dremler was also contracted to provide positive drainage at culvert ends. This meant excavating buried culverts, inlets and outlets, and extending with ditching to provide positive drainage. Ditching as a whole was not completed, but instead focus was at each culvert ranging in lengths from about 10 feet to 100 feet. Impact has inspected and rated each culvert. One item to note during this process is Sudden Valley now has 313 documented culverts. This added over 50 previously unmapped culverts to the list, roughly a 20% addition. Impact has also walked every mile of Sudden Valley roads to review and rate the asphalt condition. With all this information, Impact is now creating a new 10-year capital plan. First draft of this is expected by the end of August, and the final report is expected around the end of September. To allow for Sudden Valley to properly budget for the 2024 season in the next few years, Impact prepared a 3-page memo. This memo identified the specific projects proposed for 2024 and provided a budget range for the next 3 to 5 years. These projects and identified budgets have been incorporated into the proposed 2024 budget that Joel will be reviewing in detail. The memo addresses a few specific components. There are a total of 58 culverts proposed for replacement between 2023 and 2024. 10 culverts are proposed for replacement in 2023, and a capital request is anticipated to go in front of the board at the August 10th meeting. Remaining 48 culverts are proposed for replacement in 2024. These culverts are all simple in nature and can be completed under a notice of activity permit. These all fall under Sudden Valley's existing programmatic permit with Whatcom County. This means the culverts aren't very long, aren't adjacent to water bodies of the state, and aren't fish bearing. A typical example is replacing in kind a 12-inch diameter road crossing culvert that goes from one side of the road to the other. The existing culvert would be removed and a new culvert set in the same place. Deer Run Lane has been evaluated to be the first recommended road project. The repair to this will be similar in nature to what was completed at Cascade Lane and Green Hill in 2021. This included repairing failed asphalt sections and then overlaying the road. A yearly budget of $900,000 to $1 million should be adequate for the next 3 to 5 years. After 2024, the 10-year capital plan is anticipated to reflect replacement of larger culverts each year, along with road repairs. Which culverts and roads are unknown currently, as we haven't received any further information. Questions?
Okay, I guess Joel will go over the road, or AJ, did you want to say something?
Just wanted, I was looking, I just wanted to confirm it. So Deer Run, we don't have any of these culverts are on Deer Run, right? So we're not gonna like. I just want to make sure we don't cut our freshly paved road.
I'd have to double check, but no,
That would be my only comment. It would be good, yeah, it'll be great to get all those little culverts replaced, because then when we start doing pavement preservation again, you know, after fixing some of these roads that need reconstruction, then we're, you know, resealing that as opposed to doing it now and then cutting a freshly sealed road up, put a culvert in.
yeah, we'll make sure if there's anything on Deer Run that gets addressed either this year or next. And then it is important to note that all the culverts proposed between this year and next year are like the culvert cleaning project, where they're really spread throughout the entire community. All the gates are getting impacted by it.
And then just to clarify for the community, I guess, so it's shown in future years, it's showing just years and projects. But once we get our 10-year capital plan, we'll be able to input actual projects into those lines based on impacts recommendation.
Correct. They'll provide a detailed list similar to the memo for 2024, and that there'll be a detailed list for each year.
We also provided for another every 5 years for them to do a new evaluation. So although this is a 10-year plan, we'll have them come in and reevaluate every 5 years with the updated road proposal. That's what we built into this budget.
And we have built-in bridge inspections as well, too.
Yeah, so we added the bridge inspections last year after the flooding event. So this in 2024, it'll be time to start that, because during the flood event, we found that a lot of our bridges had never been inspected. So we'll start to do that on a biannual basis.
Does anything dramatic happen when you move these projects up to 15,000, these culverts each? The spreadsheet, I guess that's more of a question for Joel. Just wondering if we budget worst case scenario at this point, since we haven't started design on anything.
Well, if you bump them all up to 15,000, then yeah, you'll start seeing a pretty significant impact on the, if you're,
I
right
mean,
now,
it's
we
not
don't know.
It'll average out, I guess, so that's probably a fair assumption, but
You'll add
That's the main
additional
intent, AJ, is
150,000.
Yeah, and the other thing is because these are a significant number of culverts that'll start to decrease too. Like, so they're, you know, we don't know what they're going to do at 25 and 26, 2025 and 2026. So we don't have all of that. There will be a certain number of culverts, but this takes care of pretty much all of the smaller culverts. Is that correct, Tyler?
correct. Basically, all of the simple culverts that are at essentially the end of their life cycle are being put on the front end. The The alternate is when the fish passage culverts come up, such as culvert 315, they require over $400,000 to replace. On the front now, we're going to go ahead and replace these proposed 58 culverts for basically the value of what would probably be 2 fish passage culverts. So that the impact to the roads and really trying to preserve and maintain drainage throughout the community as a whole is really spread out in the first year here or through 2024 before we start doing single big projects that just affect one isolated location.
Tyler, what is the effect of a culvert that's failed? If it's not remedied, does that affect the roadway eventually?
It depends on the situation. It could affect the roadway. If there's no water going to that culvert and it fails, it might have a depression in the road. It would be pretty minor. If it has a lot of water flowing to it, yes, it would erode the road. It could erode the shoulder, could cause other damage to adjacent homes, driveways, etc.
So in a large way, it's preventative maintenance.
Correct. Go ahead, Linda.
So much as I'm all for the culverts being improved,
Sure.
I'm glad we've done all the work with the culverts. However, during the last rain, if y'all were there are places where there's gravel all over the roads that has washed. And part of that, there's one on Clematis. If you go to the bottom of Wisteria, you'll see the same thing where the water it's like sides of the road are higher than the ditches, and it just pushes the water onto the roadway and eventually gets to where it washes over something. Somebody actually took a shovel. It had to be and cleared Clematis because it was so bad. Wisteria isn't, but it's something that is always reoccurring. I had my culverts done really good. I paid to have the rest of mine done, and yet the water still ran down because of there's a berm from sand and stuff that we clean. It is just pushing the water into the roadway still.
So that is something that Impact is looking at in their memo, because historically the ditching in Sudden Valley has not been maintained. And you'll see that and it's really visible where we've excavated some of these culverts and you find them 3 feet below where the grade used to be at. It goes to show how full the ditches have become over the years. And so Impact is working to address it. To restore all the ditching would be a very large undertaking. And Sudden Valley has 44 miles of road times 2 sides, generally speaking. And that would be a massive project in and of itself as well.
I just think it's something we need to look at because we put all this money into the culverts now, and many of them have been armored, which is just excellent. But we've still got that ongoing problem with the berm at the side of the roads that we get as we sweep them and stuff. I noticed the last couple of times we've had a company come out that also has a vacuum behind, so it's not accumulating more, but we've still got the accumulation that's sitting there.
I would say too, if you have a problem that you've noticed, I would, email and describe it to Joanne and she can pass it on to Mike and, Mike
I
can
thought since we
investigate
were
it and
even
see if it's
speaking
something,
about it, I'd just
that
bring it
he
up to
can,
Mike.
see if it's something he can address,
I think it's good for everybody.
or he can put it on a list for things to get addressed in the future. I can go for anyone in the community. I would say if you see drainage issues, it's always a good idea to report them to administration.
What would you call a drainage issue? I guess a little description possibly of water that's running across the road, on top of the road, means it's not right for everyone out there that may watch this, again, it's tell your neighbors if you actually, because there's times when that water does come out, I've seen it, but if there's no report at that time, you don't see it, you can't find it. Right now, I did see some places up where Linda was talking about, and you've seen definitely the wash down the road. It was quite clear. And so all the residents out there, you see something that's actually creating a little debris wash across the road, note the street and the number of the property nearest to it and send in a note to the office so that we can actually get out there and put it on a list and don't have to go out and try to find it when it's dry. It's like when it's really raining hard and that stuff is happening, everybody out there in the community can make a note of something they see in front of their house that doesn't look right. If it's not getting into the ditches, then please report it.
And the address for that is office@suddenvalley.com.
So just I have two things. The first one's more comment for the community. There's 10 culverts identified for this year, 48 for next year, so 58 culverts, and they're identified based on basically the metal culverts, and the bottom is completely rusted out on them. So basically water's flowing along the ground instead of through the culvert.
Correct, or the culvert has a physical collapse in it, or puncture, or some other defect.
So I had one other question with the road project, Deer Run Lane. Did we have any stormwater credit left over for that at the, what was it, Spring Lane that we did? Or are
Yeah.
we gonna have to identify a new space for stormwater treatment?
It's anticipated that if we need to, we can use the banked credit to cover Deer Run Lane for next year. The analysis hasn't started on Deer Run Lane to see if it's possible to mitigate within Deer Run Lane itself, but if not, we should be able to use the banked credit.
I'm guessing that's probably gonna mostly use it up then, maybe?
Depending on how much asphalt has to physically get removed and replaced with sub-base repairs, possibly, yes. If it's similar to Green Hill or Cascade Lane, there would still be a surplus credit left.
Anyone else have any questions? About roads?
Joel's going to finish the 10-year capital planning reserve report.
Okay, so this is going to be pretty close to the same process as with these SURF spreadsheets. So I'll just, now in the 2023 column, you'll see everything that is in the 2023 column is everything that has been approved, already been approved for this year, all the roads work, plus all the stuff that is anticipated to be approved from this impact design study here. And then I guess, so this January 1 carryover amount in 2024, what that is here is basically our cash reserve balance now, and then factoring into everything that's been approved, obligated, and like I said, everything from this impact study that is anticipated to be approved for this year. Like, for example, the 10 culverts. And also, I guess a couple of things I'll point out too is, like on-call, the good thing about roads, this is actually fairly brief compared to SURF, but like, so on-call engineering obviously is area capital improvement plan. This 380-585 2023 road reconstruction drainage. So this is all the other road projects that have been approved. Potholes. Now this culvert 315, where you see it say 166,915, and then you might think, well, this culvert is more than that. Actually, of course, it's 481,615, but this is just the additional amount that's been approved this year in 2023. So the rest of it was already approved, and obviously 2022, like prior year. And then you see all the culverts, the 10 culverts worked into this for 2023. And there's the large ditches, culverts, and swales, $490,001 that was approved. And then the good thing is I still worked into this. I still left into this $85,000 fast response for unforeseen drainage issues. I know we did talk about this as a component for justification for approving this culverts, this large amount, this 490,000, but the numbers worked out just to leave it in the 10-year capital plan, the 85,000, just in case something happens, like this fall with excessive rain runoff or whatever. But that's basically what's making up 2023. And then once we get into 2024, this is going to mimic exactly what that study said with a couple exceptions. Well, I mean, basically, so we're spending study said we need to spend about 900,000 to $1 million for the next 3 to 5 years on both roads and potholes combined. So that's exactly what we're doing on this study. However, this spreadsheet is more conservative in terms of an expenditure standpoint, probably drives Tyler crazy, because then I come along and say, well, not so fast. If that money's going to be spent in future years, then I'll apply a 4% inflation rate to that, which is exactly what this is, what this thing is doing. So basically what you're going to see, and I mean, there are actually not very many, I could just cover it real fast. So 2024, you have the Area Z bridge design for amending 31,200. Then you have, there's Deer Run Lane asphalt overlay, 234,000. I believe in the study, it said 225, but obviously I'm applying a 4% inflation to this thing. So, I mean, so we have some money, I guess a little fat, hopefully worked into this because of that inflation rate, which is exactly what the reserve study report will do as well. And then we also have fast response, 88,400 for 2024. And then, but then you see all these culverts. So you'll, as the study said in 2023, 10 culverts with and then also that culvert 315. But then we have 48 additional culverts in 2024. Now, the study said between $10,000 and $15,000 to figure in for each culvert. So we just kind of split the difference and took an average of that 12,500 for every single culvert. And then basically once you get beyond 2024, then you're seeing, like, for example, Area Z bridge replacement, 2025 road repairs. But basically what you're going to see is you're going to see this pattern to where for the next 3 to 5 years through basically 2028, basically 2024 through 2028, in that range, you're going to see an expenditures of about 450,000 in roads. And then you'll see approximately 450,000 in culverts as well. Obviously this is 486,720 in 2025, but that's because it's applying 4% inflation to 450,000 to get it out to 2025. So that's why these numbers start to go up because of that. But, and then that pattern holds now with one exception in 2028. We're also up for another roads plan to be done. So we have a roads plan on the docket for 2028. And if I extended this out, which I'll do right now, then you'll see it comes up again in 2033. But that 121,665 in 2028 is a part of the roads expenditures. So, but that's basically the pattern between once you get, for the next 3 to 5 years, 2024 and beyond up to about 2028, you'll see about 900,000 being spent in current day dollars, the current day funding with that inflation rate applied to it between roads and culverts. And we'll get to a point, I'm sure, where we're just going to run out of culverts, which is fine. I mean, but the spending is factored in. But then you'll see, like, once we start getting to 2029, then we start to dial that back to about 375 for culverts. And then we keep it at around 400,000 for roads, just regular roads work. But the theory with this is once we get to 2028, we're going to have a new road study anyways with a new plan. And then that would happen again for 2033. But the bottom line with all of these expenditures is you can see that the roads is in fairly good shape in terms of, obviously, this big bold number. This is the total revenues minus the total expenditures, gives you, like in 2024, cash balance of 2,052,153. And then roads also has that recommended carry over of 500,000, kind of like an amount not to fall below. Basically, you think about it like that. And then 1,552,000 in spendable cash, so to speak. And then that pattern just extends out to 2033. But you can see that the lowest number with this plan would be 2033 at 807,000. But by the time we get into 2028 and also 2023, we'll have new roads plans.
It's actually 1.3. You're just being, Joel's being an accountant. That carryover is just like money we ignore that sits in that account. That's what he's talking about. It's like it's something the board has done for years and that we just, we try to never get below that dollar amount. And so the way he just shows it on here, but it's the 1.3 is the actual cash balance.
Yeah.
And that's why, but he works off of that lower number just to ensure that we're protecting that, 500,000 in that account.
Yeah, that's pretty much the roads 10-year capital plan, the spending plan in a nutshell, if anyone had any more questions on that.
So are the,
Closer.
so the amount that's being deposited to roads by the members is adequate. It looks like to be balanced. That's fine. My
Yes.
next question is, when you go out to 2032 and 33, I think there's some big bridges that are culverts that where there's at least 2 big bridges. Or are we assuming that when we get the new study, those will magically go away? The bridges in here, we don't have many, but when they happen, they're huge.
So the bridges will get evaluated again this year. We did that after the flood. That'll happen again this year. So we'll get a better idea, but we're not anticipating anything. And then on the culverts, when we get that final impact report, that's in September. They should actually discuss all of that out. This isn't going to look exactly the way, because they were starting fresh, right? So it's not going to look like the previous one. And one other thing that's on here that has not been on the roads before is the Area Z Bridge. And that's because Mike identified that, and that's that road that,
I was gonna say which one. There's 2 bridges in areas.
It's the bridge that accesses the maintenance side
Okay.
next to the community garden. The other bridge is basically just a utility bridge that doesn't get
Never
used
knew there
anymore
was
for
another
anything.
bridge down there, and I was just shocked when you go down there and walk and there is another bridge down there.
Yeah,
It
and
goes into private property.
but
technically Sudden Valley only has 4 bridges, the 2 at Area Z, Strawberry Creek Bridge, and then Polo Park Bridge.
Polo Park was a huge project simply because I went through that. And it's just, we don't have that many bridges we have to create, but they're definitely something to look at because they are so big and there's so many, just,
so that's
there's
one of
just so
the,
many I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed.
right.
Yeah,
And
the engineer would account for that. Like you see, those future projects are all generalized. Some of that money might get shifted in future years, like, oh, we need a bridge, so we need $1 million this year, so we'll have a smaller project the year before, whatever, they'll structure it that way to account for that type of thing.
And like we did build in here to be reevaluated. So they will come back out and do exactly what they're doing right now, and they'll reevaluate all these things. Because that's another issue, right? Is that we get this lack of routine maintenance or preventative type maintenance has cost us a lot of money. So we're building in into this reserve the funding to ensure that we've got regular bridge inspections and regular road inspections every 5 years like we should. Yeah.
The other thing I noticed is with the culvert work, we were doing, and maybe it'll get split out. You would design 1 year and construct the next. And I noticed on the bigger culvert projects, it's all just in 1 year. Oh, you're just gonna do design and construction just in 1 year?
To an extent, moving forward, we're attempting to go back to more that approach where projects will start design usually in the fall of the year before they would be proposed to be done. Part of the capital request that's going to come on August 10th or whatever that is, we're working on putting together. We'll have a proposal from Impact Design to go ahead and start the engineering and design work for Deer Run Lane and those 48 culverts next year.
Okay, I'm just saying we used to split it up and I think it was kind of to be a little gentler on the budget of designing 1 year and making sure that it got designed okay if there were any hiccups or whatever, and then constructing the next year when design and everything was complete and permitting.
Yeah, and outside of just the budget, it also helps if the projects require a lot of permitting, that sometimes we need to start those before January or February start date as well.
If I can believe some of our numbers recently on what's it called? things that we're required to do, that's just growing exponentially with the county, with permits and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of a lot of our cost.
You're right.
A question for Tyler. All these culvert replacements that are small and generic numbers, could you describe the process that's involved approximately on those to kind of explain why those are so much less and what is their techniques for replacing those? Because it doesn't seem like there's any road removal.
So generally speaking, if you have a simple cross culvert that might be 12, 18, or even 24-inch diameter, it's going from one side of the road to usually the other, vary in length from anywhere from probably 25 feet to 50 or 60 feet. Most of those culverts are pretty shallow. They're in the 2 to 4 foot bury depths, versus like a larger fish passage culvert might be quite a few feet deep. When they're replaced in kind, as the term that we use, that means we're physically putting the new culvert where the existing culvert is. So we're pretty much guaranteed to not have utility conflicts. We still have to work around utilities, but it's basically saw cut the asphalt for, say, a 4 foot wide trench, remove the culvert, then the new culvert, patch the asphalt back. They usually take 1 to 2 days to complete, and they're very simple in nature. As the culverts start getting bigger and longer, the amount of time it takes to do the project increases, which increases the cost. And then physically the materials also go up with the price of pipe increasing and that just based on the physical diameters. So the 20-foot, 4-foot diameter or 20-foot long, 4-foot diameter culvert might cost substantially more than a same 20-foot long culvert at just a 12-inch diameter. The fish passage culverts kind of have a whole new dynamic, and Sudden Valley, when the infrastructure was put in the 70s, the same regulations that we're dealing with now didn't exist. And so that's like culvert 315 is a prime example where the existing pipes there, I think, is a 30-inch diameter pipe. I'd have to double check that. And what's going in is an 8-foot wide culvert that's 4 feet tall, just to meet the fish regulations. And then when you have to upsize like that, that's also requiring the relocation of utilities. And on that project, we're physically replacing sewer, adding a manhole, 100% relocation to the water line, and having to adjust power and comms and everything as well, just to fit the new culvert. And that's really what drives the cost outside of just the additional design and permitting fees.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments on the roads or anything at this point? I guess I'd like to make one comment. I think it's great to see the bottom line numbers in the SURF and the road spreadsheet 4 years ago when I became president. Many of those years in the future were red, negative. And I think it's great that we've finally gotten to a place, put a plan together with all the work that we've done to continue to rebuild and maintain what we have. Thank you to staff for helping us inventory and doing all of the work. Thanks to Tyler for all the coordination that you do to make projects happen. A lot of people see all the hard work that gets done and it's appreciated. All right, well, if there's no questions, I think that's adjourned.
Next Thursday, we have operations.
Oh, yeah, next Thursday, we have the operations budget presentation.
So
Starting at
that meeting will start at 6 PM also.
Thanks. I apologize for getting here at 7. I didn't realize it started at 6 tonight.
Yeah, no worries. And the original agenda was incorrect as well. We fixed it in a half hour, but it was wrong when it went out. But you have the materials, obviously, for the capital budget. So if in reviewing those, you want to bring back any additional questions, there'll be time to do that in next week's meeting. So
Joel, can
next
you
week?
please send out the full version that goes all the way 10 years? Because we shortened it just so it was easier to view. Yeah, if you could do that.
Yeah, we'll send digital copy of the packet. You guys have that too. Got both.
Meeting adjourned.
What?
Here in 2 hours. Well, you know, during the budgets, I've always had. Yeah, people have more brain.
Around 9 or so. Yeah. She was like crying the other night. Mommy's fall off. Mommy, I'm falling. I'm thinking, what if she does fall off and I just lied?
I don't think that one's that dangerous.
They would just light it and we would take it out. They like catch it.
Yeah, I gotta- yeah.
School.
Oh, my.
Once the sun went down, we went to the park and played blow frizz.
We found out we're captain. But, oh yeah, that's cool now.
Yeah, it's fun. I don't do it very often, but I do enjoy it.
What about the basket?
He has solar lights on the top.